mic. Yeah. All I need is one mic. Yeah. All I need is one mic.
Hey everybody, welcome back to One Mic, where I watch shit so you don't have to. And today I'm here to talk about Season 4, Episode 8 of FX's Atlanta, entitled The Goof Who Sat by the Door. Now, the title is a play on the movie titled The Spook Who Sat by the Door. I was kind of prepared to describe The Spook Who Sat by the Door, the movie, to you guys when I saw the episode title. But the episode title, well, the relationship to that movie doesn't really have much of an impact on this episode. So I'm not going to bother explaining the movie, but that's where the title comes from, is that movie. The episode itself is actually more of a play on, I don't remember when these aired. I want to say like the early 2000s, but it was the True Hollywood story. And they would take a fairly known story and they interview all these people and they tell you kind of like the behind the scenes information on that popular story to really help you understand it. Just think of it like a television documentary about a specific kind of story. And this is the True Hollywood story about the making of a Goofy movie. And it's fictional, obviously. Obviously, if you saw it, because it's about the black man who made the movie and who also was the CEO of Disney for some time. Now, obviously, this is not true, but that's what the episode is about. So this is likely going to be another situation where I disagree with the majority of the fandom, because I feel like the fandom is kind of pre-programmed to love every single episode of Atlanta, because anytime I criticize Atlanta, a bunch of people get mad. Well, get mad, because I did not like this episode at all. Firstly, I really question the placement of this episode. You know, we have 3 episodes left. Well, 2 now, but coming into this episode, we have 3 episodes left in the entire series, not in this season, as in like now, after this episode, there are 2 more and we're never gonna see Atlanta again. That's it, it's over. And with 3 episodes left, we follow up that really pivotal and important episode of Van, Ern, and Lottie doing this camping trip and figuring out the family shit before this move to LA. We follow it up with this episode that is entirely meaningless in the grand scope of things. The grand scope being what's going to happen to the main characters, the ones we actually care about. We follow up that important episode with this one that is completely meaningless to that, like another one of these anthology episodes. But there's only 2 episodes left, and then on top of that, this anthology episode that has no impact on Van, Ern, Darius, Paperboy. This episode, I think it would be a stretch to call it funny. Like, it's really not that funny. It tries, but like, to me, well, I'll get to it in a minute. But I've talked a lot about Atlanta, particularly over these last 2 seasons, and how it's relied too heavily on getting the reference. You know, in season 3, I talked a lot about how it seemed like every episode, these anthology episodes, were just ripped from the Twitter headlines, but like old Twitter headlines. Like, hey, this thing happened on Twitter, let's make an episode about it. And it just didn't feel very creative. It didn't feel very funny. It took us away from the main cast. I didn't really enjoy it. And like I said, if you don't get the reference, then your enjoyment of the episode is hindered, right? And I think the best example of not getting the reference and how it can hinder the episode was the one earlier this season that had, I can't remember everything about the episode, but it had like the B plot revolved around Ern trying to sign D'Angelo. And the whole D'Angelo portion of this episode, I'm kind of like, what the fuck? And like you guys told me in the comments about D'Angelo, and then that made sense, but I'm like, that is such a honed in and very specific and relatable to so few people reference that it's like, how are you supposed to gain any enjoyment from an episode that from a portion of an episode that relies on information that very few people have? And I think the best example of doing this right is the Crank That Killer episode from a couple of weeks ago, which that one had a reference, but you didn't need to know about the Crank That song. You didn't need to know about Soulja Boy. You didn't need to know about that stuff to enjoy that episode, because that episode was funny. But one's enjoyment of this episode seems to, kind of like the D'Angelo thing, rely entirely, mostly, on getting the reference. And here, I got the reference and I still didn't like it. So, if I'm being honest, I really only laughed like a couple of times. When I say a couple, I don't mean like, oh, a few. I mean like literally like twice. And I found this episode to be not just boring, but kind of lazy conceptually. And I know you Atlanta stans who think that it makes you less of a fan to criticize a show that you like. Again, I would remind you, not even remind you, just watch last week's video and see how much I like Atlanta. Watch the one before that and see how much I like Atlanta. And I want to impress upon you guys the importance of having a mind that can work on a scale that's beyond the very, very basic and remedial level of, I like this show, so I can't criticize it. Like, I just can't get past the idea that every time I criticize it, people get mad. But like I said, I know people are probably gonna be pissed that I said it was fairly lazy conceptually, but like, man, like, okay, so the reference for this episode is something like, I don't remember how long ago it was, but people start, like, it was a Twitter trend, like every reference that they kind of do on here, that was about a Goofy movie being a black movie. You know, kind of think of how, it became a thing that people say that Die Hard's a Christmas movie, kind of, similar to that. But if you weren't there, like if you weren't with us shooting in the gym when the whole Goofy movie being black thing was going on, you're probably watching this like, what the fuck is this even about? And you're not even like, why was this even made? But then, like, if you don't get the reference and you weren't there for it, you don't understand what they're referring to, just like, say, if you don't know Soulja Boy, you don't know Crank That, then the episode needs to be balanced with, I think, a proper bit of enjoyment or humor for the people who don't get the reference. Think of like kids movies. Like the best kids movies still have something for adults, so that the parents who are taking their kids to see this movie don't have to sit there the whole time like, I don't give a fuck about none of this. If you don't get the references, you want to still have the episode have some sort of substance, some sort of humor, something that someone who doesn't get the reference can still find enjoyment from. And this one, man, like, I felt like it just didn't have that. Like, it just played out like this lazy version of like, white people don't get black culture jokes. Like, there's like an extended joke scene where people are talking about all the things that white people were doing wrong in the creating of the Goofy movie. And it just played out like a bunch of examples of white people not knowing how to do black shit correctly. Like, there's a guy who's like, yeah, they were dancing, they were just waving their hands around. And I'm like, white people can't dance? That's that is the Atlanta form of humor at the end of the series in 2022. We're making white people can't dance jokes. Are you fucking kidding me? Like even like they make this joke about Thomas having this gun, and the one guy that's being interviewed finds it, and he says something like Thomas made a comment like he keeps the gun because they don't know who the fuck I am. Like, what? Like you said, this feels like some remedial fucking shit. Like, that is the joke now. Like, they don't know who the fuck I am. Like, this felt like when somebody's cracking jokes on Twitter who thinks they're funny, but they're not. Like, like, we've been making fucking white people can't dance and like these sorts of like white people don't understand black culture jokes, like, for decades. Like, Goofy, please. Like, okay. Kind of funny. Like it was like, that kind of funny. The thing with the Prince movie that he made, that wasn't funny. The white guy that came into class who got beat up for making the wrong joke at a cookout was kind of funny. But just think, like, if you're a black person who's on Twitter, think of how many times you've seen a reference to a white person at a cookout, and tell me that you don't expect better out of Atlanta than to make that kind of fucking joke. That the white person at the cookout. Like, come on, man. Like, this shit felt like it was from like 10 years ago. The funniest part was, for me at least, was when the black guy told the story of Thomas doing that laugh like Goofy at this meeting, but he tells it like it was scary. Like, that was the funny part. I think he imitated it. Like, that was funny. But I also thought the Brian McKnight portion was funny, to bring him in and be like, he's the reason that Tevin Campbell was introduced to this movie. Like, that was kind of funny. I thought Sinbad showing up was like, I have not seen Sinbad with my eyes in I feel like decades. I feel like Sinbad finished doing like A Different World and then just didn't appear in anything else ever again. Like, I really feel like I have not seen Sinbad since sometime in the 90s. So digging up Sinbad was wild. But yeah, man, like I feel like, you know, taking the idea of the Goofy movie was like a black movie, taking that idea from Twitter from however long ago that was, and making an episode about that, but then making the jokes feel so antiquated. Like this, like your most basic level of like think of like white people do this like this, black people do it like that. Like that's the caliber of joke that was in here, and I'm just like, this is what you're giving me with 3 episodes left of the series. This, like, white people can't dance jokes, like they were waving their hands around, they were dancing all wrong, and then him going, look at my knees, this is how you're supposed to dance. Like, white people dancing versus black people dancing. That's the caliber of joke that we got with 3 episodes left in Atlanta. Like, what the fuck? Like, I'm fully ready to ignore all of you guys' comments about how I'm a fucking idiot for not liking this episode that you are incapable of criticizing. But that's why I'm on this side of the camera and you're on the other side. So I don't give a fuck. Like, this episode was like boring to me. It was conceptually and intellectually lazy to me. I can't rock with this episode. I'm sorry. I know I normally say to tell me what you think in the comments. I'm probably not prepared to hear that. But hey, tell me what you think in the comments. Like, if you like. But seriously, if you thought this episode was the shit, give me the counter to me saying, why is the third from last episode of Atlanta making white people dancing versus black people dancing jokes? Why is it making white people at the cookout jokes? Why is it making white people can't dance or don't get coached? Why are we getting that caliber of joke in the third from last episode of the season? Answer me those questions if you're somebody who feels like this was a great episode of Atlanta. So if you have that, give me that in the comments. Be respectful or I'm gonna fuck you up. Let me know that in the comments, and I will see you guys next week for what I hope is the second to last episode of Atlanta that is worthy of that title. So I will see you guys next week for episode 9. Until then, peace.